Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Masked Monologues. Today, I am joined with Jocelyn Bates, and she is going to introduce herself, tell us about what she does.
Oh, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm actually a soul art guide and a soul artist. And I'm also a yoga nidra guide, an Akashic records guide, and a human design coach. But my passion really lies in soul art and using the language of creativity and curiosity as a way of understanding who we are, creating transformations, asking and getting answers to all the deep questions and connecting with the soul. Yeah.
No, I love what you do. So I'm wondering, how did you get into this area of expertise? How did you get into the industry? Because you said you started out with art therapy, and I'm wondering how you transitioned into focusing on the soul.
Yeah, I started as an expressive art therapist intramodal, and I didn't even mean to ever become a therapist. It was just like I didn't want to go to regular college, right? But I hadn't had enough art classes or anything like that at the time to have a portfolio to go to college for that. So I was going for my master's, and I was like, sounds like fun because I get to play in all the arts. And they had like classes you'd sit on the floor in a circle. And I was like, that's my speed. Like, I'm not really a big lecture person. So that's how I got into that. And I was working with sexual trauma, teenage girls, domestic violence. I was working in the jail systems with schizophrenia and brain injury and spinal cord injury. And I did that for many years. But then I had kids. And all of a sudden, life took a different turn for me because I was like, ooh, I don't want my kids to ever date. I don't want them to ever cross the street alone. I don't want them to climb trees because I was working with these people who had all these traumas all the time. So I stopped doing therapy at that point and being a therapist, and I started to just homeschool and unschool my kids. And I started running creativity co-ops for other homeschooling kids. And then as I started taking what I learned developing the co-ops and the creative co-ops, because I was also a teaching artist for a very long time in the school districts in New York City, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. So I took all of that and I put it on Outschool because especially as COVID happened, everything was like we weren't meeting up anymore. So I just started working on Outschool more and more. I actually started there in 2017, but I hadn't done much with it. So I started taking all of my creativity there. And then in 2021, my parents died 7 days apart. And it was totally unexpected. Like they were super healthy, but like my entire foundation rocked and shattered. And I was in like a massive dissociation from my life for about 4 to 5 months. And when I started to crawl out of that, when I started to meditate, I started to do cold plunges. I started to jump wholeheartedly into human design. I just started following the breadcrumbs of wherever my self wanted to go because I was an only child. And all of a sudden now I'm untethered to anything. I started to actually be able to hear my natural instincts and my natural flow a little bit more. And I just followed it. I just didn't care what anyone else would say to me at the time because I wasn't doing this or that. I fell into this flow of following what my soul wanted. And in that process, I found soul art. Now, it was very similar to expressive art therapy in many ways because it uses a lot of the same techniques. But soul art is I'm bringing the soul, the higher self. Soul art's all about what channels through you in creative expression, in joy, in play, and then being able to dialogue with it to find your inner wisdom and your inner guidance and that connection to your soul. And I used soul art on my journey of grief. And so all of the things that I do, human design, yoga nidra, soul art, all of that I used on my journey in grief, and it was tremendously I don't even helpful is such a small word. It was tremendously transformative. All of these things that I use, but soul art particularly allowed me to see my journey, to see my conditioning, to heal the big wounds. Not you're always healing, but to witness and work with and move through these bigger wounds in my life. And at the same time, my art has completely changed. And this is coming from someone who never had an art class really. Like I had open studios and I'm just a very creative person. So I play within all of the arts all the time. I originally went to school for musical theater and I was a modern dancer at one point. I was a spoken word poet on the circuit in the 90s. I've done a lot of this. And when I started solar, everything started to unlock in me. And this joyful, creative, curious soul of mine began to have a playground everywhere it went. So it's been a really beautiful journey, but it's not so much different than expressive art therapy. It's just that it's so much different. I can't explain it. It's like the rules, there's no rules. Like it's truly what creativity should be in my mind. So
Okay, first of all, I want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. I know what that feels like personally, losing family members. I want to ask you a bit more about soul art. So, for those people who are listening to the podcast and might have no idea of what soul art is, like they've never heard the term before, can you explain it to us in baby terms?
Absolutely. So soul art is like going on a journey through creative expression. And in soul art, I'm a soul art guide through Laura Hollick, who began soul art in the early 2000s. And it's a process of 5 stages. And so the stages are really simple. It's like the first stage is it's almost like any shaman journey, right? You have to create an intention. So the first stage of soul art is you create an intention. Once you have your intention, the second stage to soul art, the intention can be anything. Like I've worked so many intentions around grief and healing and deconditioning, but it can be as much as what is the next article I'm going to write for Substack? It can be like even simple stuff. It doesn't have to be all these deep transformative grief things. It can be simple things. So you create an intention as the first stage. The second stage is to create a framework. So oftentimes when people are first coming to soul art, they're mapping their body. They're literally like tracing their body or body parts to create a framework to creatively express on. And there are different ways to jump into how to create your body map or an energy map. And that's the second stage. And then the third stage is creative expression. And right between the body mapping or the framework stage and the creative expression stage is a piece of the soul art, which is opening a creativity door. And that's like playing in different areas in order to allow yourself to let loose in the creative expression. So like soul art is not about creating a piece of art for a museum. It's not about like creating a product. It's really the process of creation itself. And so once you create that intention, you can let it go. You create the framework, you let it go. Then you open a creativity door and then you get to have fun in that third stage, which is creative expression. And it might be like with paints, it might be with video or photography. It might be, you could do anything you really want. It's very open. It's just it's a stage of creative expression where we let go of why we're here and just enjoy the process. And through that, your soul speaks through that. We all are very creative, but creativity is like the language of the soul. So you just have fun in that stage. And then the next stage is insight, where you actually look then back at everything that happened up until then in the journey, which is starting at intention. And you look back at your soul art and the expression you created, and you find the intention. You see what your soul is showing you in that soul art. You might dialogue with it. You might take pictures with it. You might talk to it. You might write about it, right? Just sit with it. You might meditate with it, breathe with it, move. Like maybe there's a movement in your creative expression that you want to feel into. What is that even saying to me? And then once you have an insight, the last stage of soul art is spirit action. And that's creating a very tangible and simple thing you can do by a certain time. And when you do it and that time frame's done, and I usually try to keep the time frame short, your energy comes back to you. So it's like when you set the intention, your energy goes into the journey. And then when you finish that spirit action, the energy comes back to you. So that's like a soul art in a nutshell. It's just a journey through intention, framework, through creative expression, finding the insight in your expression, and then creating a tangible action from it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a wonderful breakdown. I
Yeah.
want to know now, you said that you were involved in a homeschooled co-op, and
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you also have one-on-one clients. Is that how you usually work? Or are you just primarily involved in the co-op and you don't do client work?
Oh, so that was before when COVID happened. A lot of co-ops that we were involved in dissipated because people weren't really gathering. During that period is when I lost my parents. And I really basically took our family out of society for a year or two just while we healed because we lived with my parents and they were second parents to all three of my kids. And everything happened in the house. And it was so wrong what happened and how everything went down. No one was able to say goodbye. And there's all ends that needed to be healed in us as a family unit. So we just spent a year and a half just here in the house. We went out and did things, but I didn't bring them around a lot of kids for a while, especially since my youngest would only talk about my parents. And it was uncomfortable for lots of people to be around her speaking, always asking questions about death. And so I never actually started up working back in the co ops again. I ran the co ops, I put them together and ran them, and I would bring teaching artists in. So when I stopped doing it, no one picked up the baton to take it to the next level. So I don't really do that now, though my kids unschooled and they're still home. We'll do like simple things, but that's just for me being a parent. I actually do sessions and workshops. So I do soul art sessions and soul art journeys online and in person. And then I also run soul sessions with the Akashic Records and human design. And then I also run soul art workshops and women's circles. And I'm actually getting ready to put together a book about my grief, which is like with art and writing. But it might be a while before that comes out. I'm still in it. I actually was writing a book. I was doing this exact book on grief before my parents died. And literally 3 weeks before my parents died, and it was very unexpected. It happened in a matter of a day or two. I called my friend. I'm like, this grief stuff is hard because I was going back into a lot of loss I had. And I'm like, if I ever lost my parents, I wouldn't make it in this world. And 3 weeks later, they both died 7 days apart. It was nutty. So I actually put that book aside and I'm just getting ready to get rid of that and start afresh. So that's one of my projects I'm working on right now.
Yes, I know books can take forever to write, and especially when it's on that type of topic where you don't want to go and revisit it.
I don't mind the revisiting, but I feel like every time you get to a different stage of grief, it's, oh, the other stuff doesn't work anymore. Or I keep certain pieces, but it's like, okay, now I come at it from a different perspective and a different perspective and a different perspective. But I feel like finally I feel very solid in my ideas of grief and my beliefs of grief. So I think it's time. And I have stuff, but there's a lot more I have to write now. Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you, since you do a lot of workshops with clients, I'm assuming they're mainly women in these workshops. Is that correct? Or do you get a mixture?
I get a mixture. I run women's circles, those are just women. But, like, when I do soul art workshops, I get a mixture, and I love the mixture. Sometimes it's just women, but I love when men come in because it brings a different vibe or energy to it, and, yeah, it's really fun. I would say the majority of people that come to me are women, but not just women.
Okay, so
Yeah.
now I'd like to know, since you've done homeschooling co-ops and you also do your workshops, how do you tailor your method for adults versus
Oh, yeah, with creativity, it's interesting. There's a lot of very big similarities, and because I used to teach teens all the time, I just find that adults are they're a little more closed off when it comes to ideas of creativity and art, because we've gotten further in life with so much outside conditioning about what creativity is, what's acceptable, what's not, what's right, what's wrong, what's art, what's not, right? It's just a lot of conditioning. So I deal with that. I find I'm breaking down a lot more walls for adults, but adults generally write cursive, which makes it really easy to get like writing into things with a stream of consciousness when we're writing into finding an intention or something. Whereas a lot of the teens I work with now don't write cursive, and I find that they can't write at the speed of their thoughts. So oftentimes they get stuck up in their critic, and unless I hand them a keyboard, and I don't know. I don't feel like the connection is quite the same on a keyboard as a pen, but maybe if you grow up like that. So we end up a little bit more digital with kids. I end up being a little more digital and being able to type and move faster wherever they are so they can keep up with the speed of their brains and speed of what's being expressed. But for the most part, other than that, the process is the same in a soul art journey. And really, it's very simple to even walk someone through a journey. It's just that maybe if I'm working with adults, like the questions I'm asking about where they are in their life might be I might be explaining it a little bit differently for a teenager than for somebody who's maybe Gen X like me, who's like 47. It just might be the way that I'm phrasing the questions that we're talking about or the conversation, but the process is exactly the same.
I have to say I'm someone who definitely needs a pen and a piece of paper in my hand to connect, but when I'm
Yeah.
finished, I look back at it and it looks like scribbled on a what did I write?
Oh, I have the same thing because when I write really fast and I'm automatically writing or something, my pen goes really fast. And I'm like, so what I've learned to do is like every paragraph or so, just stop. And if there was or to underline and star or write over words, if I know it's like it hits me and I have a response to it immediately, I will immediately go up and write that word so I don't forget it. And then at the end of any session of writing, I go back. I don't waste any time. Like I don't put it away. I go right back and underline, circle, star, square before I forget. Because while I'm writing, it's pretty fresh in my memory. I can bring back up what I was trying to say or where I was going, and I can find it pretty quickly and underline it. But if I let it go even 20 minutes, it's lost to me. And I'm like, I can't read it. Chicken scratch. So I get you 100%.
Yeah, I just have journal pages that I look back on and I like, this is scribbles. I don't know what I wrote here.
Yeah. But if you stop right when you're done writing and in that moment go back, it's almost like you can catch up your memory to that place pretty quickly and just reiterate things for yourself. It's
Yes.
like, I have to do that.
So you say that you do a lot of writing in your workshops. Do you bring out the paint? Do you bring out some music? Or do you experiment with all different types of mediums?
Yeah. So if I'm running a workshop, I more keep it contained because I have a lot more people. So I'll put more boundaries on it. So I always bring everyone a journal and a pen. And then I'll always bring markers and paints. 100%. I love paints. And I'll always have magazines, but I generally keep it visual art in workshops. And I always have a playlist that I usually go into the Akashic Records for the workshop ahead of time and then allow the Akashic Records to feed me the playlist for the workshop. And when I'm working one on one in my space here in New Jersey, it's much more free. I have supplies and I have the cameras and the videos if people want to go into painting their body or their face or they want to work with the sewing machine. It's much more available in a one to one than a big group of people. So in my one to one, I find it to be more multimedia than in workshops.
Okay, so we talked about the demographic, I'd say, whether the gender of the people who usually show up to your workshops, but I want to know the type of person, maybe if there's any qualities of someone who would want to come to a workshop like this. Maybe they've had trauma in the past, or what do you tend to notice as a common theme among the people in your workshops?
I know there is a common theme of having been through trauma of people who have come to my workshops, having been through it on the other side of it, but now looking to deepen where they're going in their life. I'm not saying like people who are like in trauma at that moment. As someone who's been through trauma knows what it is, maybe seen it, has worked with it a little, and they're ready to like move through and to the other side. I also have a lot of women who are in transition who are Gen X, who are like, okay, their kids are getting older, they've been a mother and a wife for a long time. They all of a sudden they're feeling the call to do something else in their life. Maybe they're the caregiver of their parents or they've had a lot of grief. I have a lot of people who have lost people, but they're just feeling like this is not the life I want to live my life out to be, right? And they know there's something bigger and they're moving toward it. And oftentimes they already have somewhat of a practice of meditation or music or art. They have a practice of something within my realm and they see that I bring it together. I bring a lot of the things I do together and they see the gift in that and come to deepen where they're going to get a real connection to their soul. Not that they're like not connected to their soul already, but it's like ready to really have the conversations about their life and where they're going with their own soul.
Okay, thank you so much. And now
Yeah.
I want to ask if people want to get in touch with you, if they're in New Jersey and they want to see one of your workshops, or maybe if they want to do an online session, how can they connect with you or where can they find you?
Yeah, my website is jocelynbates.net, and on there is everything. And then I'm a teacher on Insight Timer, so you can always look up my name, Jocelyn Bates. And there I offer free yoga nidras and I do a lot of live courses. Like I just did a live course on soul art talking about different creativity doors, and those are fun Insight Timer. But I also, if you're a Plus member on Insight Timer, I offer workshops and courses. So I'm there. And then I also have a Substack that I just started moving a little bit further along and it's about my grief journey and through soul art. So I often share my soul art there and also just opened up a membership to have live talks with me once a month about where people are in their progress and their creativity and jumping into all the little tiny details of soul art here and there, not all at once, just like picking a piece and working on it. Picking a piece and working on it. So that's where you'll find me. Yeah, I also have an Instagram. It's Soul Sessions by Jocelyn. Yeah, that's pretty much all of my.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us here today. And please do go check Jocelyn out because I'm sure she'd love to speak with you. And if you like this podcast and you want more episodes like this, then please leave a review and share with a friend or family member.